1. And we are recording. Trevin, how's it going, buddy?
I'm great. How are you, JP?
Good. It's nice to finally officially meet you. We've done a lot of communicating over text, social media, everything since 2005, if you remember. That's when we first met.
And we met, didn't we met? We met through a antelope hunt. An antelope.
Bullsite.com.
Yeah, and an antelope hunt in Wyoming.
Yep.
We both, you and your brother, I think, and I had access through Chuck.
Yep.
I think Chuck was the land manager or the ranch manager.
Chuck Brinkerhoff.
Yeah, and I was filming for Best of the West at the time.
Yep.
And we were antelope hunting, and you guys were hunting that. I was hunting that, not at the same time, but
right.
Yeah.
It was funny
cool.
because what happened on that hunt, I'd never antelope hunted before. And my brother and I knew a kid from Las Vegas that my brother used to work. My brother lived in Las Vegas for a while, so he met this kid named Brandon Ruckman. And Brandon and his parents used to hunt Wyoming all the time. And they kept telling us, man, you guys got to come hunt Wyoming. They gun hunted it, and they said, but you'd be able to kill them with a bow. So they ended up telling us to put in for 2 units. And we ended up putting in for both of the units, and we drew the unit on Chuck's place.
Right.
But we didn't know. We wanted to draw the other unit. So the Ruckmans had said, well, we don't know anybody over there, so we're not even going to hunt. And it's mostly all private. So I called Game and Fish, Wyoming Game and Fish, and I just asked for a list of anybody that would allow any public or any private owners that would allow hunting. And they said, well, here's a list of 4 people. And the funny thing was I called through all 4 people, and the last one that answered was a guy named Bug. And I said, hi, Bug. I said, do you allow antelope hunting? He goes, you got to talk to my wife, Joy. She takes care of it. So she jumps on. She jumps on, and she said, well, we're all filled up this year. And I'm like, for bow hunting? She goes, oh, you want to bow hunt these things? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, oh, nobody bow hunts them. You can have the whole week. And I think it was either right after that or right before that, I went to Bowsite and I typed in anybody hunt antelope in unit X, whatever unit it was. And I get a message from a guy, T13. Says, hey, I drew that same unit. And it was you. And I'm like, T13? So we started talking, and I think you were talking to them at the same time that we were. It was really ironic. You ended up killing really good goat on that hunt.
The funny thing was on that hunt, I think I sat 4 days, that they had a couple of water holes. And the problem was it seemed like every time you set it's hot, and this is not super conducive to spot and stock bow hunting. It's more, at least for what we were doing. And I was trying to sell video and stuff like that. It was more conducive to blind hunting. And so I'd set up a blind, and then you could just see just far enough to see the other tank.
Yeah.
And I'll be darned, it was so frustrating because you'd be sitting there and the critters would go there. And I think what I ended up doing the 4th day, now mind you, I'm sitting in a blind. I have no pants on.
Hot
because it's hot. I think I had a little thermometer keychain deal that I brought, and I put it in the top of the blind, where all the heat rises, and I think it got to 114. And I'm sitting there. And what I did the last day was early in the morning, or maybe it was still dark. I went to the other blind and I pounded in a steak, and I tied a white garbage bag to it, like a grocery shopping bag to it, maybe a couple of them, just so that it would rustle in the wind, because the wind always blows in Wyoming. And I ended up, I think it was like 3:30 in the afternoon, and here comes these cows to water, and there's a buck behind them, an antelope buck coming in, and the cows end up clearing, and I shot that buck. And I think it was like he didn't want to commit to the water hole. And I think I ended up shooting him at like 52 yards.
Nice.
And he, antelope and southeastern whitetail are the jumpiest, stinking critters, right? You hear about people trying to shoot Alabama does and how they're like just keyed up. Yeah. Well, he whirled. And and he whirled kind of into me. So instead of shooting him behind here, I caught him right here at the shot. And I just remember at the time I was filming for Best of the West, but I was also filming, I was doing a bunch of stuff out of the Double Bull blinds when Keith and Brooks and those guys still owned it before they sold it to Primos.
Yeah.
And so I was getting content for their DVDs. I don't know if you remember when you bought a Double Bull blind, you got a DVD,
Yeah.
you know, their latest DVD. And I filmed that hunt. I mean, it was blood was squirting everywhere, and he didn't go very far, you know, that whole thing. And I just remember after that hunt, I sent that video, the footage to Keith Beam, and he emailed me back, or maybe he even called me. He goes, Trevin, he said, I can't use this. I said, what do you mean you can't use this? He goes, it's too bloody. I'm like, dude, these are the guys that are the kings of
lopping heads off turkeys.
Lopping heads off of turkeys, and they can't use my footage.
Yeah, shooting geese on a golf course out of their blinds.
Yeah. So anyway, that was kind of fun. It was fun, but that was a hot day. I just remember I took about 3 Louis L'Amour books, and I would read a page and then look up. But what are you going to do? I had my lunch with me. You know, I had everything, water, plenty of water, but you in a situation like that, because the property wasn't huge,
right?
And so we could only hunt, you know, a little area, but it was big fields, and you'd look on the other side of the field and you might watch a herd of antelope for 4.5 hours. And I mean, I prayed. I think I did a lot of things trying to get them to come over to me.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a patience thing. And you know, the buck I ended up killing finally just showed up. Like, you know, when the cows came in, he came in, and, you know, so anyway.
Yeah, I hunted that place. That was 2005. It was such an amazing hunt. My brother showed up the day before we did. I was in Colorado elk hunting, killed my first bull on my own, do it yourself, 2 days before I got to Wyoming. And then the very first day I shot my first Wyoming buck, antelope buck, right there on the water hole. And then we came back. That was 2005. I think we came back in 2007. We skipped a year. And I drew a buck tag and a doe tag. My brother had a buck tag, and we brought a friend of my brother's. He had a buck tag, and we were done on day 3. And then I went back in 2012. Chuck was still there. And, you know, Chuck had gone through some really hard times. His wife had passed, and then his son committed suicide.
Oh, I didn't know that. I knew his wife had passed, but I didn't. Oh, my goodness. His son committed suicide?
His son committed suicide.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and he found him. And you know how Chuck is. He's a world-class individual. I mean, we've always stayed in touch with him. So he was really in the dumps. He was really, really down. And so Bugs and Joyce moved him off that ranch and brought him up to Elk Mountain to their ranch and moved him into a house in town so they could kind of keep an eye on him a little bit. And they brought a new guy in to work that little ranch there. And this guy was a little different. He wasn't like Chuck. He wasn't as helpful as Chuck. And, you know, he kept saying, you see any badgers out there, you make sure you kill those badgers. Because we've been watching, this guy kept saying, I've been watching the badgers kill all my calves. That's what he said.
Wow.
I don't believe it. But so when you drive in on the property on the east side or whatever, on the right side of the property, I don't know the direction, there's that native hay. And then on the left side is all the alfalfa. And then in this, you know, for the listeners, you envision this alfalfa, 3,000 acre alfalfa farm surrounded by sage. So these antelope would, in the day, they might move off the alfalfa and sit up on the sage and overlook the alfalfa, or they just lay in the alfalfa, but then they're just always there. And they'd always tell us there's hundreds of them out there. You know, they got to the point where the Wyoming Game and Fish gave them fireworks guns. They're shooting at the antelope to try to get them off the alfalfa. I mean, they get $7 for every antelope that's killed. They can't get them off. So it's a great place to hunt. No, I mean, it's just totally private land, wide open. Well, there was no water that year. And so it was a spot and stalk. And that was really difficult. And Chuck Chuck would kind of bounce back and forth to the ranch. And he said, you got to hunt the buck that's living in the native. He's got the biggest diggers, prongs of any antelope we've ever seen on this farm. And sure enough, we roll out there and boom, there he was. And I ended up killing him. Well, trying to pattern him, he would run, you know, those big drainage ditches that would run all the borderline of the property. So we'd see him in the native, and he would leave the native in the morning. He'd be there in the morning when we woke up at dark. You show up He had 13 does with him, and he was in the native hay. He was the only buck. And then he would run the does off, and they would go up into the sage in the afternoon. So we set a blind. I had a doe tag too. We set a blind over in the alfalfa on a fence corner. And then I was going to spot and stalk this. We called him Mo. We had a nickname for him, Mo, the big digger one. And so first morning I seen where he crossed. So we were there before the season started. So we were kind of scouting. So I kept seeing where he was crossing. They had these little scoops.
And that was a September 1st start date, right? For that area?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So we got there a little bit early and was just watching them. And then so I set up right at one of these crossings across this big 8-foot, drainage ditch that they flooded and flood the fields. And here comes 1 doe, 2 doe, 3 doe. And I'm like, kill this thing on day 1. And Chuck told us that this buck never would go over into the alfalfa. He only lived in the native and the sage. So here comes doe 13. I'm like, any minute, this buck's going to come by. They're going by at like 35 yards. I'm like, this is going to be a slam dunk. And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And here he pops out in the sage 150 yards away. And I'm like, what in the world happened? He just took a different crossing. So that day we went over and we sat in the blind. So we waited. He went up in the sage, and there's no more deer on the native. So we walked over and got in the blind. There's a little cow decoy we used to get out into the blind, set it down, got in the blind and sat there. And it was probably about 2:00 in the afternoon. And my brother said, hey, he's looking back up above the farm, back where all the old vehicles were. And he's like, here comes Mo following his does, coming over to the alfalfa. And Chuck said he never comes. He came out to 50 yards right in front of my blind, and I shot a foot over his back. I just drew back, got down on my knees, and we're in a kind of a corner of a fence, and I draw back like this. I'm like, I was so stinking nervous for some reason. I get nervous when whenever I'm going to shoot an animal, I get my adrenaline's going. And I shoot, and I'm like, and he just stands there, and then he kind of trots off. My brother looked at me, and he goes, what did you do? I shot like 1.5 feet over his back. He's like, what in the world? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I just blew it. Unbelievable. I blew it. Well, we hunted him again day 2, same thing. I couldn't find where he crossed. Day 3, couldn't find where he crossed. Day 4, I couldn't catch up with him. He never came back into the alfalfa again. I ended up shooting the doe. I got if you can see it, there's the doe right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the doe I shot. She had good little antlers on her, so I mounted her. I did a little European mount on her. Well, finally we figured out, I was hunting every single crossing where Mo was crossing this drainage. And sometimes I sat one spot and his does would cross again. And it was almost like he knew I was there. So the one day I figured I found a spot way down on the end of the property. And I'm like, this has got to be where he's crossing, because he keeps coming out farther down from where I think he is. And I just kept, playing it. And he ended up, what we found out he would do is if someone drove down the driveway and those antelope were in the native, they would take off running 100 miles an hour to get out of the native. They're really weird. And so I'm sitting there, and here they're working their way toward me. They're about 700 yards away. And I'm like, they're kind of coming my angle, and I'm like, oh, perfect. I bet I picked the perfect scoot where he's going to cross this drainage. And all of a sudden, the rancher driving down the driveway, he's leaving the property. And I'm like, oh no, this ain't good. And they start trotting a little bit. I'm like, oh my goodness, they're going to run right by me. He's trotting a little bit more. And next thing you know, I think antelope, when they take off running, they scare themselves. So they look at each other. They were looking at each other, and they must have been going 70 miles an hour coming right at me. And he crossed that scoot at 70 miles an hour. I mean, all the does would run, they'd stop, and then they would jump down through it and go. So I'm like, well, he's going to run right to it, and he's going to stop, and I'm going to get one shot. So as he's getting about 100 yards away, I draw back, and I'm like the scoot's 20 yards away, and I'm like, waiting. That buck never stopped. He hit that scoot like a freight train. And I'm like, whoa, he was gone. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. My heart's going 100 miles an hour. And I turn around and look. And this is funny. Here's what I did. You'll think this is funny, but I didn't want to move. So I had my phone, because I was videoing him as they're out in the thing. And I'm looking at him through the screen of my phone. I didn't want to get up and turn around. And he's standing there broadside, looking back at the scoot. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I just slowly turned, ranged him. And my rangefinder's going like this. It's bouncing. Trying to hold it like my heart's going. And he was at a certain distance. He was at actually 67 yards. And I said, okay, that's a long shot, but I'm gonna draw back. And if I shoot long, my theory is I draw back. If my pin locks on, I'll just squeeze it off. If I'm like this, I'm not gonna take the shot. And I drew back on that buck, and all of a sudden my pin goes thunk.
squeezed it off and smoked that thing. It was the last day that
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Really awesome story. Cause so at their place, I was able to, I killed 2 bucks on water and then 1 in spot and stock. And then I went back 2 years ago with my oldest son.
Oh, really?
There's a guy named Cole there, and he's a really great guy. He's a rancher. He's working the ranch. Chuck got remarried and moved away, so he's doing really good.
Good.
And I called Joyce, and she said, "Yeah, I'll get you." And I said, "I only want to bring my son. I don't want to hunt. My buddy's son and my son want to come, and I think they're 13, they're 15 now, so it was 2 years ago." And she says, "We'll make a spot for you. Don't worry. I remember you. We like you guys." And so she put me in touch with Cole, and Cole's calling us as we're on the way. He's like, "Hey, if you guys can get here, like in the next half hour, there's a herd of antelope on the driveway with a pretty good buck on it." I mean, because they're all over. So we went, my son ended up killing his first antelope buck, and then my buddy's son killed his first antelope buck, and then my son had a doe tag too. He put in for an extra doe tag, and I had a 28 Nosler built, and I wanted my son to shoot one. I wanted a long range shot. Yeah, he's a really good shot. We're shooting all the time, and he killed his doe at 550 yards.
Oh, that's
Boom!
awesome.
Dropped it, 13 years old. So
That's great.
and I'm not a big yardage guy. I don't want to say that and make somebody mad, but I mean, he had a rock solid rest and killed it dead. So
That's awesome. That's a great hunt for youth,
phenomenal.
because of that ability to have the number of animals, opportunities, stuff like that. So that's great. I killed my one and only animal with a muzzleloader on that place.
Yeah, that's right. A couple years
Because-
after.
Right.
us, right?
Remember when I was with the Best of the West, and the whole idea was this, bringing some archery in to give it a little different flavor, that type of stuff, right? Well, they were like, "Well, why don't you at least shoot a muzzleloader?" So I got a muzzleloader, and I've never shot a muzzleloader before. And that's not true. I did actually get a muzzleloader sighted in for Guy Eastman when I used to work for Eastman's Hunting Journal one time. But I mean, I didn't have a ton of experience. And I went out there, and what we ended up doing is in the alfalfa, we jumped into little ditches. They had those little ditches throughout that alfalfa field.
Yep.
And there was a herd, and I wanted to get within 100 yards, and I had a scope, and I mean the whole 9 yards. I mean, it was a pretty cool deal. And I remember belly crawling through the weeds in the ditch, and then popping up, and then trying to get steady. And I remember I shot, and of course it's all smoke, right? And I'm like, well, did I hit him? And the guy that was running camera was behind me, and he didn't know because it's all smoke, and I did. I shot the antelope buck, but as I turned back to the camera, I'd scoped myself. And I had this trickle of blood coming down my nose and stuff. But
that was a great animal. That was probably one of the best antelopes taken off that property. The one you shot with your muzzleloader, wasn't it? Or was it with your
that was
bow?
a pretty good one.
I remember it was good. Yeah,
Yeah.
that place is such an incredible place. It is, for youth to take antelope hunting in general in Wyoming is the best place to take youth if you want to go out of state, because there's so many antelope. I mean, you could hunt any public place and find antelope. That's for sure.
It's there's more antelope than people, and so a lot of it's private, and the public does get hunted pretty hard. But like you said, it is it's an opportunity. There's lots of opportunities, so it is a good one. I think it's the biggest antelope I killed in Wyoming, but down more north of Rawlins is where I was at, and that was I actually posted a picture on Instagram the other day, day before yesterday, I think, of that. I was just kind of going through old photos, and how you get nostalgic in it, and it's definitely number one, it's a gorgeous photo. There's the contrast of colors and the backdrop. It's just gorgeous. And that goat's 86 and some change, and I shot that goat, and I mean I 10-ringed him, but he was quartering away, so I got one lung. And that was one of those deals where you're like, oh yes, that's great. And he runs and he runs and he runs, and luckily, as this is a big place we were at where we could get up on a high spot and I could keep track of him. And it was a couple hours later before I snuck in and put another arrow in him. But
I'm just
yeah,
looking at it right now. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Biggest cutters. I killed an antelope in Colorado that was 79 and some change, and then that's my first 80-inch goat, 80 plus.
That's a beautiful one. Look at that bow all decked out, got color all over it.
Yeah, so that's the Aspen Assassin. That was that old snow camo.
Yeah.
Hoyt had a snow camo blend, and then I would put those yellow accents on it, you know, and so it kind of looked like an aspen tree in the fall,
beautiful.
you know.
It's a great looking bow. Well, tell everybody, you know what? We just jumped on and we started talking. Tell everybody who you are, man, what you do. You're big in the outdoor. You were big in the outdoor industry when I first met you. I mean, you'd been filming, you know, a lot of filming. Obviously, you're a hunting fool. You hunt all over the place. You got some great tags for this year. It's going to be an exciting year for Trevin. But tell us how you grew up, where you grew up, how you got into hunting, what that looks like.
Well, I grew up in southern New Mexico, in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and my dad didn't hunt, but my grandpa and my uncles all did, and my cousins. So that's how I got into the hunting industry, was through my uncles taking me, and I was pretty energetic as a child. Let's just say that. I was, I was a handful, and so I have to. Hats off to my grandpa and my uncles and my cousins and all for putting up with me and taking me out but I fell in love with that lifestyle and I was a pretty small kid. And when I mean small, I mean, you think of the smallest kid in your sixth grade class, and I was probably smaller than he was. I as a sixth grader, I remember I weighed 62 pounds and I wanted to play football. You know, in the Pee-wee football deal. No, actually in sixth grade, that's not true. In seventh grade, I weighed 62 pounds. In sixth grade, I weighed, right around 50. But I couldn't play football in sixth grade because I was too small. You had to weigh 65 pounds. So my seventh grade year, I went out. The last year I could go out for that smaller Pee-wee league or whatever they called it. And I remember at the weigh-ins, you had to weigh in because you couldn't weigh more than 120 pounds, and you couldn't weigh less than 65. And I borrowed one of the linemen's shoes. And I remember I felt like I drank a gallon of water, and I put rocks in he had big old feet, right? And so I put rocks in his shoes and then put my feet in. And I came in on the scale at 64 and a half pounds, and they let me play. But after that season, I realized, okay.
Scrapper. You were a scrapper, weren't you?
But wrestling was my sport.
Yeah.
And I never cut weight. I started out where I couldn't cut weight because there wasn't another smaller weight class. And so I did, my dad wrestled, my uncle wrestled at Iowa State, my dad wrestled at University of New Mexico. And so I came from a wrestling background. My dad was a referee, a high school referee. So I grew up going to tournaments and duels and stuff like that. And I rolling on the mat, but first time I ever did competitive was in junior high, and then I started wrestling. And then from then on, I played soccer and stuff like that. But over time, wrestling was my sport, and I committed a lot to it. And I wrestled freestyle and Greco, and any way I could get on the mat, that was my deal. And I had a chance in New Mexico later on in life. I grew up, killed my first deer in the Gila, the legendary Gila area.
Yeah. Where did you grow up in New Mexico? Where was it again?
Las Cruces.
Las Cruces. Okay.
Yeah. And but I got a chance to do some guiding and stuff growing up. And then after I finished my wrestling career, I actually started riding bulls. And because I had a lot of friends that were in the rodeo scene, Las Cruces is a pretty agricultural based town, and my grandpa was a farmer, and so I had a lot of friends that rodeoed, but again, wrestling being my primary sport, I was pretty concentrated on that. And but when I was done wrestling, I said, I want to try this, and just like anybody else, you get on some steers and stuff like that. But what wrestling had taught me was I was a leg rider, so I had really good, for those of you wrestlers that understand what I'm talking about. If you don't, a leg rider is a guy that when he gets on top, he he slips a leg in, and it's a control position where you can turn and get back points and even pin guys. But it's really a guy that you have to have good hips. You have to be a good scrambler. You have to understand. If you watch MMA, you'll see a lot of guys that'll, when they take the back, they'll slip the hook, way they call them, the hooks in. And there's my beautiful daughter right there.
I seen
You
you
know, like earlier, I seen something moving around. I'm like, is that
Avery,
your elbow?
wave,
I'm like,
wave.
no, that's. Hi, how are you?
That's my daughter. She's hanging out with me at the office today. So what I did was I transferred some of that, what I learned, and that balance and that stuff like that to bull riding, and yeah, it was fun. When I first started, I think I just went by on grit and try and determination, and then rode the first bull I ever got on, kind of hanging off the side, but I just wouldn't quit. And then I didn't ride 30 other head. You know, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, so I ended up going to a bull riding school, and so I did that for a couple of years, and actually, 4 or 5 years, and got to a pretty high level, and actually moved to Texas and was living with some buddies that were a lot better bull riders than I was. But
you really had the perfect build to be a bull rider, though.
Yeah,
I mean, not
I was
giant, but small, wrestler, strong.
Right. Yeah. And so
yeah.
So I enjoyed it, and then when I hit that 25-year-old age, they always say that your frontal cortex, your frontal lobe isn't developed till you're 25, and I can tell you almost to that time I was starting to think, okay, maybe this isn't the lifestyle I want for me. I was starting to think about the future and about having a family and stuff like that, and I ended up moving back to Las Cruces and became a police officer there, and did that for a couple of years, and then ended up going into sales for a company called Hunter Engineering, which I still work with today, over 20 years now. And they produce balancers, tire changers, brake lays, alignment systems, things like that. And I'm the factory rep. And it's a great company because they make just the best stuff out there. And if you've had an alignment done recently, you probably had it done on a Hunter. And so anyway, but it also gives me the free time to chase my dream, which started out when I moved to Colorado. I started riding, and that's when I got into the industry. And then from there, you and I met after I'd left Eastman's Hunting Journal. I worked for them for a while, and then I went independent. But in the time, I'd fallen in love really with photography and videography, and that's when, in 2008, I started Outback Outdoors, and so we're going into our 12th season. Hard to believe.
So tell me what Outback Outdoors is. Tell everybody what it is and how to find it and all that stuff.
What it is now and what it started out to be, I hope is pretty synonymous still. We started out wanting to tell our adventures, share our adventures. We didn't, there's tons of people out there that are better bow shots than me, that better hunters than me, better callers than me, better, but I will say one thing, I'm a storyteller. And, when you're in business, as you know, JP, your best bet is you find people and utilize their strengths. Don't try and make them into something that's not their strength. Find people where they have strengths that you need. And then if they love that, if they're into that strength, which usually they are because they're good at it, and then you encourage them and they flourish and they go from just a mundane to getting up excited about working. I always wanted that. Well, we wanted to produce adventures. We wanted to show adventures, and we didn't know a lot. We still don't know a lot, but we wanted to be able to capture our adventures and share them. And so me and some buddies, Adam Wells, Dave Baronio, some guys, actually at the beginning, Jim Brennan and Ryan Litwin actually were along with Adam Wells, were the individuals, the first four that we kind of came together and said, let's do this. And we partnered up and we ran camera for each other. We didn't have designated cameraman. We just but as we grew, life happens and people go different ways and stuff like that. And it ended up being kind of, after a couple of years, Ryan Litwin, who was a rodeo clown, real estate, some different stuff, he Anyway, it ended up being Adam, Dave Baronio, and myself for many years. And our whole goal was just to be able to share our adventures. But as time went on, I really wanted to go more to the cinematic, and I wanted to be able to share an adventure, but I wanted the focal point to be the country and the animals and the adventure itself versus, hey, look at me. You know, I didn't want to do that. And so as the DSLRs came around and you got more into a cinematic type of style of videography, I really worked on understanding that and becoming better at that. And I think we've come a long way. I think we've learned a lot. And, you know, our success is directly relevant to the people that are involved. You know, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it by myself. I'm a good storyteller, but I'm not the best cameraman. I'm not the best editor. I'm not the best, you know, all of these different things. And so other people step into those roles and you have a partnership and a team, so to speak. And that's what makes it fun.
Right,
you know?
right. Well, you guys have done well. You won some awards. You won
We
awards
have.
on your ibex hunt, didn't you? On that video.
The first ibex film I actually sent out on. I didn't realize this at the time, but there's these independent film festivals all over the country, heck, all over the world. We won an award actually we won 3 awards for the first ibex film, which was The Rock and Ibex Adventure. And then which is where I went to the Florida Mountains in southern New Mexico, and we filmed that hunt. And I never even fired a shot. It was such a difficult, hard to film bow hunt. And then I drew it again. That was in 2014. I drew it again in 2016, and we went back, and I did kill a little Billy the last day. And we made another film out of that. And that film won. Believe it or not, it won the best bow hunting film in a huge European bow hunting tour.
Wow.
A guy, Errol got a hold of me from, I think, France. Errol got a hold of me and he said, hey, you know, I saw the first one. I know you're coming out with the second one. Can we enter it in this film festival? And I said, yeah. We ended up winning best film. And then we've won some other awards. We won the Yeti best film of the Badlands Backpack film festival that's usually at the ATA show every year that was 2019. A film called Adoption, which is a story about my dad and me, because my biological father left. I didn't remember him. He left before I was so young. I didn't remember him. And then my mom remarried, and my dad is my dad. He's not my biological father, but he's my dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I always wanted to tell that story. Well, again, as I said earlier, my dad didn't hunt. But as I started filming, he wanted to film me. And he got in the excited mode of learning cameras. And so he just, instead of hunting with a bow or a rifle, he started hunting with a camera. And he would go with me on my whitetail hunts and some stuff like that. And so I was, for 3-4 years, I was wanting to tell that story. And I didn't know how. But we used the backdrop of hunting, telling that story. I mean, I could have used the backdrop of wrestling, but I didn't have the footage, right? And so we told that story, and it was a pretty successful film. And so yeah, that's kind of us in a nutshell. You know, the whole thing is, and I hope people get this idea, is we want to capture imaginations. That's Outback Outdoors' whole goal, is to capture the imagination. I mean, whether it be the photography that the guys do or videos or whatever. If I can hand you or show you a Instagram post or the example of an episode, you know, that's on Sportsman's Channel about Outback Outdoors, or a film that we've done, and you can see it, but you're not cold, you're not wet, and you're not tired, but you still capture or feel that adrenaline, that excitement that we have, then we've done our job.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I watched both of The Rock on your ibex hunt, because I also ibex hunt. So it's pretty remarkable, because you put you put that hunt in reality where I could sit on my couch and watch it and relive the suckiness of that hunt. Because it's not an easy hunt. It is one of the toughest things I've ever done. I didn't go near as long as you did, but tell everybody where they can find these, because I think I want people to watch it. I mean, it was, you know what, you guys did, you did really well. And you said something, Trevin, that I think is really good. If you're a young listener and you listen to this and you're a good storyteller, get into sales. Yeah. I mean, my grandpa always told me, and my grandpa was an incredible man. I'd start crying if I told all the stories about him, but he'd always tell me that growing up, you know, we'd go hunting every weekend, and then we'd always go to my grandparents for lunch. They'd always cook us, you know, something. So we'd go squirrel hunting. We'd come back with 5 squirrels, and my grandpa would be like, JP, tell me a story of that squirrel. And I mean, an hour later, still telling a story on killing 1 squirrel. My grandpa would always tell me, he goes, JP, I don't know what you're going to do when you get older, but maybe you got to sell cars. You just got to do something in sales, because I love telling stories. And so you are a great storyteller, and you're a great storyteller through the camera, with emotion. I think, you know, it's like music. Like you guys are like making music, you know, you listen to a really, really good song and it kind of takes you back somewhere. It gives you these weird feelings that you like, oh man, I just think of high school again. If I could do it over again, you know, like a song could do that.
Right.
Your videos do, you guys do that really well.
Well, and I think that music we choose to back, I mean, you have to understand there's a lot of different ways to evoke an emotion. You have all the senses. Well, with video, we don't have the sense of smell. You know, the hearing can be difficult when you're dealing with being in the real world, out and about. And if you get cruddy, windy days, you know, it makes your audio cruddy. But we have video, we do have audio. And then you have music. And so I even use music in my storytelling, because, and that's why we use, I don't know if you're familiar with Shane Smith and the Saints out of Austin, Texas. It's a kind of a Texas Red Dirt type of band. We use a lot of their music because they are a storytelling band, if you will. Shane Smith is a phenomenally gifted vocalist, you know, musician. The whole band is, I've seen them in concert a couple of times. They're one of those bands that's as good in concert or better than they are on their album. And, but they tell a story. And when I hear music, I envision my mind, the way my mind works is I envision what imagery would match that. So I'm a little bit different. You know, when I'm listening to a song, let's say they come out with a new album, I'm envisioning where this song would fit into a storytelling mode or a part of a story. And so you have all of those things, but I think the key is how do you match them in a way that's seamless? So if I put a heavy rock and roll, because I like this song, let's say, and I put this heavy, you know, hard guitar, deep thumping bass or whatever behind a scene, and it takes you out of that moment, I've done you a disservice, rather than being able to bring in a song that sucks you closer to the story. That's the key. I think that's that tightrope walk that as a storyteller that you do, sitting around a campfire. The inflection of your voice, the way you retell a story, you know, you could either bore somebody or you could have them on the edge of their seat with the same story. So understanding that and reading your audience in a live setting is very different than trying to tell a story for an audience of, you know, millions and millions of people that watch our show. And that was hard because I didn't have the immediate feedback as I'm building this story. But what I found was if I build the story and we here in the office, the guys working on it are captivated, brought back to that moment, usually we're pretty close to capturing that adventure.
So music is magical.
It is.
I really think so. And you guys, you do a very, very good job with it. So it made me think right when you said that, like if Shane Smith and the Saints, I wrote it down because I want to go listen to it. I love music. The movie Legends of the Fall.
Oh, yes.
They used music so good. And, you know, they're in an outdoor setting, and I believe it was Montana. They filmed most of that. That's on your shirt. And that's what you guys do so well. So it made me think, you know, because I am in sales. So next, you know, maybe I got to Zoom at 11 o'clock. I got a sales presentation. Maybe I'll just, as I get into my sales pitch, I'll just have a little music on my phone and I'll just play it in the back. Imagine a salesman walking in for a sales presentation, say, hold on a minute. And you're just playing their own little music, like to captivate you.
2 songs from Shane Smith and the Saints. I want you to listen to Geronimo.
Okay.
And The Mountain.
The Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay. Those 2 songs, listen to those, and they have a plethora of good music. But those 2 songs, if you listen to those and you don't think this band is kick butt, then you're not living.
Well, I'll listen to it right away. I love music. When we get off, I'm gonna play these guys up and check them out. They probably you need to contact them and you get some shirts.
Well, I do, and we've been wanting to take them hunting, and it's just their schedule never worked. And then they were actually coming in concert like the 3rd of January, and their bus burned. I mean, literally everything in their bus, it burned to the ground. And after that, and that was in December, I think. Or right around that time. And so they were kind of scrambling just to do their dates. I think they were renting guitars, and I mean, so anyway, yeah, it's one of those things. And now I just heard, poor guys, one of the band members has COVID. So everything's on lockdown, you know, all the dates that they had, they're getting through this 14-day quarantine. The guy's feeling good. I mean, it's not like, from what I followed on their Instagram, I think everything's okay, but they have to, you know, everybody, and then everybody else has to get tested, you know, and all that stuff. So they've been dealt a pretty couple of tough road, but these guys are just amazing. And I saw something, and this is what really captivates me about a man's character, is I saw a deal on Instagram the other day, and through this hard time, you know, you could sit and you could whine and you could cry, and then there Shane Smith is, and he's writing music. Like he's not in this downtime. He's not sitting there whining and complaining about what cards he's been dealt. He's turning around and taking this moment or whatever and these ideas and getting creative with it. And I'm a huge goal setter, and I'm a huge proponent of sometimes you just got to suck it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know how it is.
You were a wrestler. You were a wrestler. You understand it.
Yeah. And you too, I mean, you coming from such a fitness aspect, you know, I have 2 ACLs on my left knee, and I still play on 2 different soccer teams. Over 40. My daughter calls them Grandpa's United.
Hey, still doing it though.
Hey, but we're still playing, and you know, it's so much fun. You just can't lay down and quit. And I've got so much stuff going on. You have to be organized. But anyway. I digress there. But it's a lot of fun, and so yeah, music can really set a tone. I think good videography. I think understanding the basics of videography, rule of thirds, understanding cameras, understanding how cameras work. If you understand how a camera works, photography, videography, in a manual setting, you can basically pick up any camera and run it. Now, it might take you a few times to figure out, okay, where is the ISO on a video camera versus, you know, something else. Or like these DSLRs, you know, you're adjusting your ISO, you're adjusting your f-stop, your shutter speeds, all of these different things for the conditions. And then what that gets with the lenses that we run, that gives us at times a shallower depth of field, which also gives you more of a cinematic look. There's all these things that compound, did I say that right? They build on themselves, let's say that. And so it's a lot of fun. At one time I'm like, man, I want to do this to where all I do is this. But the reason I haven't quit my day job is because this industry is so fickle. And what I mean by that is it's a great industry. The people are awesome, but it's a small industry.
It's very small.
People
don't realize that.
Yeah. Have you been to ATA?
I've never gone to it, no.
Okay. Well, if you go into ATA, You got SHOT, which is your Shooting, Hunting, and Outdoor Trade Show in Vegas every year, and or it has been quite a bit lately. I actually have gone to SHOT in Orlando. That's how old I am. It hasn't been there in a while, but you got SHOT. You got ATA, which is the Archery Trade Association. You walk into the ATA show, and you would think it would be immense. You know, pretty much most, 90% of the players in the archery community are there, and it's not very big. It's not very big. So, we're in a very sensitive time with hunting too, with what's happening in the media with guns and hunting, and that spills over into bow hunting. Even though we're not shooting a firearm, it spills over that hunting aspect. And then on top of that, we are in the hunting world, more people are dying of natural causes than we're recruiting. So trips like you and your buddy's son and your son going out to antelope hunt in Wyoming, that is huge. You know, my daughter being able to kill her first buck in Wyoming 2 years ago, being able for her to talk about understanding where she knows, she understands where meat comes from. Some people think meat comes from the King Supers or the grocery store, whatever, grocery store you have in your area. No, it doesn't come cellophane pre-packed. Something died, something had to be butchered, something had to be processed. Well, we probably 95% wild game, mainly, is our protein. And my daughter knows exactly where that comes from. And she's been involved in that process. And she can speak intelligently to other people that are 14, 15 years old and that are being influenced by today's pop culture, which, let's be honest, there is I don't want to call it a fad, but there's definitely an anti-hunting thread, anti-gun thread that runs through our pop culture. It's funny how when COVID hit, all of these anti-gun people were lining up at gun stores to buy guns. But that's a totally different story. But
we could be on that one for a long time.
Yeah. But with Avery, it's the ability for her to understand that. And she hunts because she wants to spend time with me. I don't know that Avery's main goal is she gets up every day. Matter of fact, I know it's not, is to get up and get ready somehow for hunting season. But she enjoys it because we get to spend time together, and she understands the process. And, if you've ever seen a factory farm, you look at the life those animals lead, and I would much rather be able to take something that's free and wild and it doesn't have the hormones, doesn't have all the steroids, all of that stuff, shoved into it. And it's been able to pass on its genetics, and we play a part as a conservation aspect of hunting. The Fish and Game of the states we hunt in, they rely on hunters to help manage population levels. It's important, to understand that there is a box, and that box is an ecosystem. And animals, when they get to a certain number, they're pushing the borders of that ecosystem. And in order to be healthy and sustainable, we need to keep them at a certain level. So that's where hunters come in.
Yeah. I think if animal rights activists understood that, what you just talked about, how as a hunter, you are the number one conservationist on the planet. Like everything we do, from the money raised to the taking of hopefully mostly the older, most age class animal, and what it does to help the animals thrive, they would understand that hunters like you and I and the hundreds of thousands of hunters that are out there truly love animals. Like I truly love animals.
Yeah.
I love to hunt animals. I love to eat animals, but I love to watch animals. I mean, we live on a golf course now, and we have geese walking up and down here. You see, there's one of those Instagrams, Nature is Metal.
Yes.
And it shows that, and it shows the reality of how nature is harsh and brutal. And as an outdoorsman, I don't like to see other animals eat other animals. I mean, it's just, I kind of got a softer heart. I have no problem harvesting an animal I'm going to shoot and eat, but I don't like to see other animals getting killed and gored and all that kind of stuff. I mean, if they just really understood We're not some bloodthirsty, ravaged, barbarian caveman that wants to just go out and annihilate every animal in the population and beat our chests. You know, they see somebody who shoots an animal and they pose with it and they think, well, it's bragging and it's posing and it's so egotistical. No, it's the whole process of everything you just explained. Getting up every morning and getting my workout in at 6 a.m., eating good, doing another workout in the evening, a heavy backpack hike every single day. Because when I go out hunting, shooting my bow every single day. So when I go out hunting, I can enjoy every process of that, make a clean, quick, ethical kill, take it apart in the field, bring it home, feed my family with it, get healthier because of it, and try to pass that on. And I think a couple different things that come to mind when you say that, Trevin, is social media is our kids are growing up in a social media world. And I love social media. I mean, it's important. Social media is not going away. I don't think. You know, anything's possible in our society today. Now, nothing is past what I believe anymore, but they grow up in it. And I said this to my friend the other day. I believe social media is the devil's playground. I really do, because it's dividing our country. You got somebody just a keyboard warrior sitting there just attacking every post that they don't believe in. And then these people attack back, and then other people chime in, they attack back. Instead of being an overwhelming place of positivity and good. And I think you do a great job doing that. And I think if we can teach our kids that, hey, enjoy social media. It's a way to connect. It's a way to, you and I have been connected through it from day one. I've never met you in person, never had an opportunity to shake your hand. One day we will. We've hunted two different properties, by the way, Chuck's place and Dennis Perkins' place at the same time, almost same time. And we've never been able to actually meet. I'll tell that story in a minute. But
I forgot about that, Missouri.
Yeah. So we can be and teach our children to be a positive force on social media. And of course I have political, and I posted one political, but it was a funny one this morning. You'll see it on my Facebook. So 5 years ago, it just popped up my time hop. My kids were fighting. I have a 15-year-old boy, 13-year-old girl, and 11-year-old boy. Well, 5 years ago, they were, 5 years younger. And my daughter's in the middle. So we made this Get Along shirt. We wrote Get Along on it. And then a John 15:12 or whatever it was, a scripture verse that says love each other. And we put them both in the shirt and put it over them. So they both had to wear it, and they hated it. And I just posted, I'm like, wouldn't it be great? I'm thinking of mass making these shirts and sending them out all over our country because people just need to get along. And I'm like, wouldn't it be great to put Trump and Pelosi in that same shirt? And so I went to Photoshop. I photoshopped Trump's head on one, my son, and Pelosi's head on my daughter. And I posted it side by side. But I don't get political on it because I'm never going to win somebody's vote for the way that I want to vote just by trashing the way that they believe. I mean, what makes America great is we all get to believe what we want to believe. That does make America great, but it also can be damaging, and social media is a damaging aspect. And the last thing I wanted to say, because it's all kind of things that you've said, was hunting is a small industry. People don't realize that. And they keep saying these statistics that we're losing more and more hunters every year, but what I'm not seeing it. I know it's statistically it's true, but I think it's where we're losing it is like what you said. The generation after us and the generation after them are not getting into it the way that we did. We're losing them to something. Are we losing them to technology? Are we losing them to social media and just not the work ethic? I'm not sure, but our age group, the fitness bow hunter, the fitness hunter today, there's more of them in Arizona than there's ever been because they're all in the spots I used to go 7 years ago that they were never there. Now I'm like, I thought we're losing hunters. But what we are losing is that next group coming up. So things that you're doing, I watch you on your Instagram. You're always taking kids, taking them to Kentucky, taking them to Nebraska. Ray Howell, he's been on multiple times on the Bit Archer podcast. What he's doing with Kicking Bear and introducing kids to the outdoors. We need more of that if we want our sport to continue.
I agree. And one of the, jumping back to social media, I was sharing this the other day that when people post stuff on social media, it is the cream of the crop. It is them at their best, if you will. And what we've done in a way is we've done a couple of things. One being that we've put this false sense of reality for us to compare ourselves to. Okay. So when somebody posts and their feed is completely them at the gym, and I'm struggling with getting to the gym, how does that make me feel? Right. Well, hopefully it's more motivational, but we also live in a society where that has become the standard for beauty. It's become the standard for our self-worth, likes. It's that dopamine dump that comes from, we look at our phone, how many likes did I get? How many thumbs up did I get? How many comments did I receive on this post? And it's tied to our self-worth. And that has nothing to do with our self-worth. We were created in the image of a creator that is far greater and far beyond that. Yet we are comparing ourselves to this image that is filtered, an image that is monitored, that is only shot at this selfie angle that's just right. And it's false. And then the other problem I think we've done that comes from social media, and again, I use social media and I think it can be a great tool, but it's a shortcut. Okay. I could come on social media and I could play myself off as somebody that I'm not. So I have the ability to be whoever I want to be through images and video, but in reality, that's not who I am. So I think we do that in real life anyway, but it's a much smaller scale. I mean, let's be honest. Why do you look at what you wear? Why do you comb your hair? I mean, because you want to look presentable. You want to put your best foot forward. The old saying, you only have one chance to make a first impression. We want to make that great first impression. But with social media, there's so many ways we can dupe the system. Right. And I mean, I could put on there that I'm in the gym every day. I don't go to the gym. I mean, I do other things, but I'm not a gym rat. I don't have time. It's not a high enough priority for me. I do other things, okay, but that's not me. And so one of the things I have to be very careful of is when I'm posting things, that I'm posting honesty, and that it's positive. So I think those are the two main pitfalls of social media. But on the flip side, it's also a great way to connect. It can be. And I think everything good has too much of a good thing can be bad, right? So there's everything within moderation. But I'm excited at where the industry is going. I think we need people more like you and Ray Howell and guys like that do see that next generation and Ray's touched more people's hearts and minds than I will ever, and I'm really I'm excited to call him one of my mentors, and so yeah. I mean, speaking of Ray, I kind of met you and met Ray, and then you guys knew each other, and then Dennis Howell and Dennis Perkins and all of that stuff. So yeah, maybe talk about Missouri.
Yeah, so I've been to Missouri a few times. I go there one late season, Ray's Lake. I met Ray in 1994. Sorry about my dog in the background, but
no worries.
I met Ray in 1994. I told a funny story when he was on the very first podcast that he did with me. So he liked wrestlers at UW La Crosse at the school that we went to. My brother was 2 years older than I was. My brother's a bad dude. National champion wrestler, 3-time All-American. He's a police officer now, 18 years, something like that. One of my idols that I shouldn't say idols, but a guy I really, really look up to is my brother. Well, Ray really enjoyed wrestlers. And so I'm sitting there one day, my brother said, hey, this guy, Ray Howell, wants you to do a job for him. And Ray owned the steel business back then. So he asked if I could drive some blueprints from La Crosse, Wisconsin to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which was an hour and a half. Yeah, I can do it. My buddy, John Severson. I don't know if you know John.
I know John. He's John Faradine. Yep. Mm-hmm.
We grew up since kindergarten together. So
yeah.
we've been.
Is he still with Faradine?
Yeah, he's vice president. Yeah, he's been there long. I mean, he's 20 companies they own now. He's got a good gig going.
Yeah.
So John's girlfriend at the time lived in Eau Claire, and we lived together in college. We roomed together in college. We went to college together. So we did everything together. And I said, John, you want to go with? And he goes, yeah, I'll pick up my girlfriend. So we drive there. We borrow one of our roommates' cars, drive there. On the way back, we're driving back, and we passed this school bus, just like everybody else is passing. Well, we get back to our apartment, and my roommate, Brad, says, where have you been? My parents have been calling. The cops have been calling. You're in big trouble. And I'm like, for what? Like, we weren't doing it. I mean, I was a partier back then, big time partier, but we weren't doing any partying. We did just honest kids going back and forth. Well, the school bus driver claimed that I passed him when he had a stop sign out. And he wasn't going to give me a ticket, he said, but then he said I reached my arm out and I flipped him the bird. And that was not me. I wouldn't do that. I mean,
Right.
had I been under the influence, I was wild, I wouldn't have put it past me. But we never touched a drop of anything that day. And I'm like, I didn't do that. So that was how I first met Ray. He paid me $20, and as a college kid, $20 was like everything. Well, it ended up costing me $280 in a fine and a ticket, and that's how I ended up meeting Ray. But Ray had called me. He's like, man, you got to go hunt Dennis Perkins' place and go late season. It's the best. And so I went, and you know how it is when you go to Dennis's. He was driving a little Geo Tracker, and he would take you.
His Hummer. That's it. He calls it his Hummer.
He calls his Hummer. And this one morning, he said to me, he said, hey, I got to take you extra early because I'm picking some guys up. And it was you and a couple other guys. And he said your name. I'm picking some guys up. Trevin, I think you know him. I'm like, Trevin Stoltzfus? That's how I say your last name, right? Stoltzfus?
Right, yeah.
He's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, I know Trevin. I've never got a chance to meet him. He goes, well, maybe you'll get to meet him. I don't remember why we didn't get to meet, but he dropped me off in the one stand on the place that he leased out, through Eagleville or wherever it was on the far lease. 55 minutes before light. And he said to me, he goes, it's really, really cold out this morning. So if you get cold, just call me. I'll come get you. I don't expect you to sit long. It's 20 minutes before light, and I am not making any of this up. I'm doing squats, air squats in my tree stand because I'm so cold. I made it maybe 30 minutes after light, and I called Dennis. I'm like, Dennis, I can't take anymore. Well, that night was my last night there. And he took me past his personal property to a little bitty chunk. And it was the greatest night of my bow hunting whitetail life. So I'm sitting on this broken down stand. I mean, it was the stand.
I know exactly what you're talking. I know exactly where you're talking about.
I know because I think you killed my buck. I think you killed my buck. One of you guys did. So I remember sitting there and there was all those turnips, and I watched, I don't know how many 2.5-year-old bucks walk by me. And I turned around and I look, and there's this 8-pointer, and it looked like baseball bats coming out of his head. And I'm like, oh, he's going to follow. And he's just gobbling these turnips up. Sugar beets, I think they were. Sugar beets. And he's gobbling. I'm like, he's going to come through at 20 yards. I'm going to kill him. It's going to be so amazing. It was the greatest night. I mean, I seen probably 15 bucks that I let go. And that buck starts walking, and at 40 yards, I couldn't turn around and shoot him. I was waiting to come aside. At 40 yards, he turns around, walks away, and disappears. And I think the next day, then I left. I had to drive back to Wisconsin when I lived there, and Dennis texted me, goes, that big 8-pointer got killed by Trevin and his group, and you guys killed him. It was just an unbelievable buck.
Maybe a 8-year-old deer, something like that. I mean, just an old deer. Adam killed that buck. Like 2 days later or something.
Yeah. I went there.
I sat that stand the day after you did, and I saw him, but he never came into range with me. Here's an interesting thing. When I first met Dennis, I was hunting another property in the area. And I actually first met Dennis through Ray Howell when we did a Kicking Bear camp where people came in and hunted turkeys with us. And then, anyway, so that's how I met Dennis. Then I wasn't seeing anything. And so I call him and I say, hey, you got any does? I just want to shoot something. He goes, yeah. He says, but I'll come get you. I'll take you out. And he took me to his place, which if you know Dennis Perkins' place is like, he's forgotten more about whitetail than I'll ever know. And it's pristine. And yeah. So I'm sitting in this tree stand, and my job is to shoot does. And I'm seeing all of these deer come by. And the cool thing was that, I say the cool thing, I was new to whitetail hunting. I hadn't hunted whitetail. I was 33 years old before I ever got in a tree stand. And so I was very new to whitetail hunting. But once I did it, man, I was addicted, man. To the chess match. So we're sitting there and it's getting dark and I'm not seeing any does. And then all of a sudden these two deer come in or this one deer comes in and I'm looking, and the last thing he told me when he dropped me off is he said, "Don't shoot any button bucks." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. No, that's no problem. Right?" Well, it's dark. Okay. And you know how a button buck will have a little brown patch. It might not even have a little bump, but if you look close enough, you can look at the face, and after time, now I look and I'm like, I can't believe I mistook this for a stinking doe. Shoot this doe, what I think is a doe, and it doesn't go far, right? And then it's getting dark. It's still legal light. Another one comes in and I'm looking and I shoot that one. I got 2 does, man. I'm stoked. I shot 2 button bucks.
Oh no. I never heard about that.
Oh yeah. Dennis, he's like a steel vault. He won't say anything to anybody, but that's how. And here's the deal.
That's a ticket to get yourself booted off that beautiful place right there.
Right. You know, here I am in this Mecca and I'm doing exactly what he asked me not to do. And I just told him, I said, "I am so sorry. I felt so bad." I'm like, "Dennis, I will pay for those. I know those would have been good bucks at some junction." He goes, and he finally just stops and just laughed. He laughed. I mean, belly laugh. You know, he's a big old guy. Stout as all get out. And he just laughed and laughed and laughed. And, you know, we've been great friends I probably talk to him once a month. I mean, still, I don't hunt there. I've got a place in Missouri, but I'll be honest, he's taught me more about wildlife and whitetail management than I've ever learned from anybody else. And I help to manage a property out in southern Missouri. And then I've got a place in Kansas that I help manage. And I'm just ate up with whitetail and that whole chess match. So it's pretty exciting.
I went there 2 years ago. So I've always tried to get on his personal property. I've hunted his property, but I was always hunting the lease outside, which was phenomenal place.
Which I had an encounter the first year he had it with a buck that was 174 that ducked my string out of a ground blind at 32 yards. And he was probably 175-inch deer at that time, called Bonfire. We nicknamed him Bonfire because he looked like he had a bonfire coming out of his rack. And my cousin shot him the next year, 204 on that place.
Yeah, they've killed, like, just off Dennis's personal place. I think I'm right with this. I think this is what he told me. They've killed 11 bucks with archery that have 200 inches or better.
Right.
That's unbelievable.
Right.
I seen the year that you were there, that you and I were there at the same time. There was a 6-pointer that I had 2 different encounters with that would have pushed high 140s, potentially 150. When he came in, I mean, he looked like a steer coming through, and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm gonna kill this thing. And he came through, and he had no brow tines. And Dennis is like, "You're lucky you didn't shoot him." I almost shot him. I didn't even realize you couldn't shoot.
When was that?
Well, it was the year you.
Okay, because I saw that deer. I saw that deer, and I know exactly what you're talking about because he was amazing, and we couldn't shoot him at the time because he was only a 6-point.
And they have to have 4 on one side.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was giant. He was a giant.
But 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, good friend of mine who's been hunting Dennis's personal place. I could never get on Dennis's personal place. And I introduced my friend Ricky. His name is Ricky Roberson. He's we call him Big Country. He's an unbelievable dude. You'd love him. And he hunts in Texas like crazy. He just chums up with Dennis, and him and Dennis become like this. You know, he drives up and he brings the shrimp and everything and the corn, and they do the shrimp boils. And I'm like, "Ricky, how'd you get on Dennis's personal place?" I can't get on his place. Every time I call Dennis, I'm like, "You got any openings?" He's like, "I don't have any openings." He doesn't even have to. He doesn't advertise anything. It's the same guys going every single year.
Mm-hmm.
And Ricky calls me. Now, I had a couple, this is 2 years ago, I'd hunted all over the place already. And, you know, I have kids and I got to run them to football and everything. And so my wife's like, "Hey, she lets me hunt. She's beautiful. She's an angel. But there is a limit as well. And I don't ever want to overstep that because I also want to be a responsible husband and a good husband and a dad."
Right.
And Ricky calls me and he goes, this is on like a Monday. And he goes, "Dude," he goes, "you're the only guy I thought of." He goes,
Saturday I'm leaving to Dennis's place and my buddy just backed out. Can you go? And I'm driving somewhere with my wife. I'm like, hun, here's the deal. If I don't go, I don't get another in. Like, this is my in to be in his place. So on Wednesday, I booked a flight. I was there Saturday. And the big bucks were all locked up. Every big buck was locked up. I filmed I put them all on Instagram and Facebook. I don't know how many bucks I filmed that were at that 135 to 140 inch, which for a trophy hunter, that's nothing. I'm not a trophy hunter. Right. I haven't killed that many big whitetails. I killed a 144 inch 8-pointer. I killed a 150 inch in Missouri at a different place the year before that. And then I killed, some 130 inches. And these bucks are coming through, and I'm like, I just looking at it going, it's got to be bigger. Like, that's got to be 150. I'm like, it's not, so I can't shoot it. I passed up probably 7 or 8 bucks that were all within 20 yards coming through. I could have shot. I'm just going to say I could have killed them. And the last night, Dennis kept saying, he goes, can you extend your stay? Can you stay longer? And I'm like, I can't. I got to get back. I've already been here 6 days. And he's like, can you just stay a couple more days? I know if you stay a couple more days, you'll kill buck. That's the kind of guy he is.
Oh, yeah.
I had paid for the days. He's like, you don't have to pay anything else. You're my buddy. Just stay. And when I say pay, I don't want anybody to think like it's a high fence. It's just he manages. This is wide open. I mean, come gun season, people are lined up along his property trying to kill the bucks. It's wide open land. It's just a lot of acreage, and he manages for world-class deer. So he's an outfitting. He's just got a world-class place. My buddy Ricky, the one night Dennis had said, he goes, hey, here's a buck I want called out of here. If you see this buck, kill. It's like a 155 inch 10-pointer. It's just had a weird shaped rack. Well, of course, Ricky, I get a text one night, just killed that cull buck. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, Ricky. Yeah, I killed it dead. I mean, it's just one of the biggest bucks probably I'd ever kill in my life. He's
and it's a cull buck.
It's a cull buck to get off that property. But Dennis is a world-class guy. He had a lot of issues with raccoons and coyotes and bobcats. And I told him, I said, hey, my brother is a big-time trapper. My brother loves to trap. I call him the trapping fool. And my brother went there last year and ended up getting a beautiful bobcat off his property. And they trapped some coon and all that kind of stuff. And now he's going to be going there every year for Dennis.
That's awesome. Let's
finish up with a couple things here. You got some fitness type competition things you're doing.
Yeah. I'm
really interested in that.
So in the past, I've done something called Train to Hunt, which I don't do anymore. And primarily it's because of my knees. And that was where CrossFit meets bow hunting. A lot of CrossFit exercise done throughout a course for time. There's some 3D shooting and stuff like that. What I'm doing now is called the Alpha Bow Hunting competition, and it's really awesome. You start with the whole goal of Phil Mendoza's Alpha Bow Hunting is to, and you can check it out on alphabowhunting.com, but the whole goal is to create a base of what is your realistic effective range. Okay. I can go out in my backyard and shoot at 60 yards with no wind, and 60 yards is easily my effective range. But it's not my effective range all the time. Understanding under duress, in windy conditions, animal behavior, uneven ground, all of this stuff changes your effective range. And
You mean real life bow hunting.
Exactly. And everybody goes and they shoot 60 yards. So that's how far I'll shoot a buck. Well, okay. What if the wind's blowing? What if the buck's alerted? There's all of these factors that end up cutting down your effective range. Well, that's the core. And he actually does a course on this, which if you get a chance, you can do it online. I would definitely take it. It's a great way to test yourself, because I might have an effective range one day of 65 yards in a hunting situation. The next day it might be 35 because of the conditions or whatever. And I think that has to be determined beforehand. And I tell you this because this competition came out of this whole mindset, this idea of being able to understand our effective range. The alpha bow hunting comes in and you end up testing yourself on 3D course. Now the 3D course is similar to a lot of other 3D courses, except for the scoring is they don't count the 5. Yeah, I'm trying to think. 12s, 10, no 8, no 5. So if you understand a 3D, the lungs are an 8, then you have a circle, and then a small dot in the middle, which is a 12. If you hit the body anywhere else, it's usually a 5, or a 0 is a miss. Well, with the Alpha Bow Hunter, a 5 is a -3. Okay, so it's almost kind of like the Fred Bear scoring system, but it's a little bit changed. So you shoot a 3D course first, 20 targets. I think it's 20 targets. And then that kind of ranks you where you are in your division. Okay, men's masters, which is I shoot in that, it's 40 and over. They have a super masters 50 and older, and then they have an open, which is 39 and under. And it ranks you. And then you go head to head, the head-to-head competition. And this is where it gets really interesting. They have 5 targets, and the last 2 targets, they're 2 identical courses side by side. So imagine if you're standing on a shooting line and there's 5 targets, okay? The closest 2 targets are the identical. They're just, they're mirror courses of each other. You start out the course back to back, and you run down to the first target, and you take a sled and you drag it out. Now, mind you, you're not running with arrows or a bow. You have a bow caddy, if you will, like a golf caddy. You have a guy with all 6 of your arrows. Mind you, there's 5 targets. You have 1 mulligan you can use, but it takes time. This is a timed course. And on each target, there is a clay pigeon, like a shooting clay pigeon, right? Hanging in the middle of the tin. You run out, you drag a sled out to a predetermined position, you run back, you grab your bow, you knock an arrow, you shoot the first target. That's your closest target. Then from there on, it gets further out, okay? Then you run to the next station, you grab a sandbag that is there, like a brute sandbag, or, like a CrossFit sandbag. You grab that, you run to your sled, you drop your sandbag in it, you run back. Now you shoot the next target. Again, what's happened? You have the adrenaline rush of competing one-on-one with someone. All you care about is beating that other person. And then it's a bracket. You advance forward. If you hit the clay pigeon or the clay target, it's no addition to your time. If you hit outside of the clay, but within the 8, it's a 20-second penalty. And then a 5 or a miss is a 40-second penalty. Okay, so you can imagine a bad shot, that'd be bad. So the key is, how fast do you go that you can shoot accurately? Okay, you only go as fast as you can so that you can shoot accurately, because you can't outrun bad shooting. Because you could be the fastest guy on the course, but if you can't hit clay targets, the other guy could basically walk the course and he'd beat you. Okay, so that's that whole thing, and you just keep going until you have a winner. And it's so much fun, because what it's doing, number one, is it's working on finding out what your effective range is out to a certain distance, under duress, under adrenaline, under not exhaustion, but at least out of breath. And that's hunting.
What's the farthest target you shoot at? How far is the farthest one?
On the 3D course, it might be 50 yards. On the actual course itself, I think that the furthest he's ever stretched it was like 42 yards.
And that's when you're under duress, 40, which is a long shot when you're under duress.
Yeah. And he usually has these 2 big grizzlies facing each other. They're like this, with their arms up. It's just so it's an impressive backdrop, and of these 2 targets, and you're shooting. You've seen the targets that pop up and then go down. Well, it's kind of similar to that in the fact that you have to execute the shot within a certain amount of time, but the targets don't go away. I've even had a point to where I've come to full draw, and the wind was blowing terrible, and I had to let down.
Wow.
But that's hunting,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Because I knew that if I shot, I was going to miss. I let down, I let the wind gust die, drew back again, made the shot, but yeah, so that's what I do.
Where do these take place?
Well, they normally, there are actually a couple of different areas that they do this, but unfortunately, COVID kind of put a little damper on that this
Yeah.
year. So all we're doing is nationals, which will be at No Limits Archery in Denver. That is July 17th, 18th, and 19th, I think. So
Can anybody show up for that?
anybody can show up. If this is something you want to do, get on a plane and get here. This is a great community. You can go online and register. It's a great community. My daughter actually is going to shoot in national. She's shot in it in the past. So there's a kids, it's a great competition.
Yeah.
Good people. And the cool thing about this versus like a train to hunt where you're on this big course is you have all these people that are cheering for you. It's all happening right in front of them.
Right.
So you have the adrenaline of people screaming, go, 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 and all that stuff. So
Yeah, I've been watching you do it. So I did the train to hunt a couple of years ago down here in Tucson.
yeah.
I've always wanted to do it. I've never been able to do it because I was always on a baseball field. And finally, I'm
Right.
like, I'm skipping the baseball tournament.
Right.
I really enjoyed it. And I've wanted to do this for so long. I work out at a big CrossFit. And they built it's a 15,000 square foot CrossFit facility. And so I kept telling my buddy, I'm like, we need to do an indoor one, just one we put on. We got a bunch of people that want to shoot, and let's do it. And I got a bunch of people that will shoot. Let's do it indoors in Phoenix when it's really hot and just have a fun little competition. That's where the Fit Archer came from. We do something similar called the Fit Archer competition, just
Right.
indoors though. It's not outdoors.
Right.
But we do CrossFit, like we do box work, no CrossFit skills type stuff. And it's so much fun. I mean, what you notice is the camaraderie in the hunting community is so great. Like when you say there's people cheering for you, of course you're in competition, you want to win, but you're still there to see the next guy succeed. You're still there to see the next girl succeed and cheer everybody on. And man, the more we can mesh our hunting community together, whether it's a gun hunter, muzzleloader hunter, bow hunter, youth hunter, crossbow hunter, traditional hunter, whatever it is, to keep our voice positive and strong is important. It's really, really important to do. Let's finish with, I know you probably
I gotta head out. So
you got to work. I get you to work. I'm just going to go tell some stories today. So what hunts you got coming up? You got a couple quick hunts.
I drew Colorado moose. That's pretty exciting. My daughter drew Wyoming deer. I drew Wyoming deer and Wyoming elk, and I have New Mexico elk, and then the whitetail stuff. So I've got a lot of hunts. This year I'm trying to cut back on the amount of time I'm gone because my daughter has volleyball.
as you just list off like 6-7 hunts.
So there's a lot of hunts like Colorado elk and stuff like that. I might have to just say I'm not going.
Yeah.
But it's my daughter sitting over here saying, I'll go for you.
Yeah. But she wants to take that moose hunt. Hey, take his moose hunt.
No, she can't have my moose hunt.
That's going to be, I'm really excited to follow you.
Busy year.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see what you do on moose hunting because I know it's a tough tag to draw. I know you're a great hunter and you're going to find the right moose and you'll get it done and you're going to kill a great moose. There's no question.
I'm excited. I'm excited to for sure to have that opportunity. And in Colorado, it's the Holy Grail. I've killed a mountain goat. I have not drawn sheep, but moose is definitely probably about, I don't know if it's the hardest, but it's definitely a harder hunt. So I'm excited. It's going to be a great adventure, and we're going to capture it all and share it with the fans and everybody wants to follow along. We'll try and where I'm moose hunting. It's really bad cell phone signal. So I probably won't be that much of an Instagram type of live thing, but we'll take some amazing imagery and then share that later on.
Yeah. So tell the listeners where they can follow you, Outback Outdoors, where they can find you on social media, all that kind of stuff.
Outback Outdoors on Instagram and Facebook, Trevin Stoltzfus, common spelling, on Instagram and Facebook. We've got our podcast, the Inspired Wild Podcast, on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, those places. So we've got, you can follow us there. If you need to get a hold of me, instant message me, probably is the best. Or you can go on the website, outbackoutdoors.com and send me a message. But we're coming on, this next week will be our first show of the 2020 season for Sportsman's Channel. Our old shows are getting on Amazon Prime. You can go to Amazon Prime, search Outback Outdoors, and you can watch some of our older stuff, and that's going to continue until we catch up. But we start on Sportsman's Channel at 10 p.m. Eastern. That's 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and so it's probably 7 p.m.
my time.
on Friday. starting next week. And
Very
you can,
cool.
You can watch out back that door. So
Very cool. Well, Trevin, man, it's been great to. We've never chatted through. I get to look at you here, so it's kind of like an introduction. Maybe one day we'll
spend some time in camp together.
Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah. So we've hunted a lot of the same spot, got a lot of the same passions, and thanks for jumping on, man. Thanks for connecting.
Well, and it's great. I'm excited to be able to. I'll take this podcast, turn around, put it on my channels. You do the same, and it's a great way to cross promote. I've known you for a long time, have a lot of respect for what you're doing, and vice versa. I think so.
Yeah,
it works out well,
man. Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of wild connections that we met and
yeah, for sure.
One day we'll share a little bit of campfire one day and hunts together, and no doubt. So
sounds great.
God bless you, man. Have a great rest of your day.
God bless
and have
you.
a good 4th you.
Yes.
Good 4th of July.
Oh, you too, sir. And it's great talking to you.
Yeah, you too, Trevin. Take care, buddy.
All right. Bye.